Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to see a nice crowd, especially after the rains of the other day. But I am John Mann, Director of Education for Lakeside, and I'd like to let you know that when they ran the newspapers, and you'd probably notice that it was Tuesday, Wednesday all over again. Well, they reprinted them, and the new ones are in the back. So as you leave, feel free to take a new one, and your old one, please recycle. But for this year, we are celebrating the cultural and geographic regions in the United States, and during week 7 of the lecture series, we're exploring the region of the U.S. known as the South. This region is known for its warm climate, diverse collection of states, its storytelling, distinctive cuisine, literature, and music. And the Wright brothers' historic flights took place at Kill Devil Hills near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, a location chosen for its ideal flying conditions. And we're fortunate that joining us here today is Angie Burgess for a program that will celebrate flight. In today's presentation, she will share Dayton's significant involvement in the Wright brothers' invention of powered flight. Angie is a historian, public speaker, community volunteer, and a lifelong Daytonian. As a reminder, we have a session this afternoon at 3:30 with Bobby Horton, and he will share songs and stories from the Civil War. I would ask you to please mute your cell phone ringers if you haven't already, and help me in welcoming Angie to Orchestra Hall.
Good morning, and thank you, everyone. I'm here from Dayton, nice 3-hour drive through the 75 and then State Route 6. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so the Wright brothers' invention of powered flight in Dayton was a pivotal 20th century achievement, making global travel possible and influencing both positive and negative outcomes. Known as the birthplace of aviation, Dayton and other Ohio cities inspired further innovations in flight, and this program will highlight those inventions and their creators. So through the invention of powered flight, Wilbur and Orville made significant contributions to human history. In their Dayton, Ohio bicycle shops, the Wright brothers, who self-trained in the science of art and aviation, researched and built the world's first power-driven, heavier-than-air machine capable of free, controlled, and sustained flight. The Wrights also perfected their invention during 1904 and 1905 at Huffman Prairie Flying Field near their hometown of Dayton. Both a French syndicate and the United States Army negotiated deals with the Wright brothers in 1908. The Wrights also formed the Wright Company, which coordinated the Wright exhibition team and flying school at Huffman Field. The Wright exhibition team operated only briefly from 1910 to 1911, while the flying school lasted through 1916. The flying school trained both civilians and military personnel. Famous aviators who trained at the school besides those shown in the photo include Henry Hap Arnold, Roy Brown, and Marjorie and Edward Stinson. The Wright Company Flying School, constrained by the topography and size of Huffman Field, required students to follow a set course with only a few areas for takeoff. However, the field's proximity to the interurban line, by then known as the Ohio Electric Railway, again helped mitigate its disadvantages. During the time of the flying school's operations, the interurban ran every 30 minutes from downtown Dayton to Simms Station. At the beginning of the 20th century, Dayton was one of the largest interurban cities in the U.S. This made travel convenient for flying students and spectators. A large crowd of spectators would gather at the edge of the field at Simms stations, where a series of flights were conducted from May through July of 1910. just after the opening of the Wright Flying School. A trolley car is visible in the background. The exhibition team and flying school helped market the Wright brothers' invention, which they also manufactured in Dayton around the same time. In 1909, the Wright brothers started using space in their bicycle shop at 1127 West 3rd Street to produce airplane engines and drivetrains. They also manufactured airplanes at a temporary location at the Speedwell Motor Car Company in 1910 until their new factory was completed. Whoops. The 13,800 square foot factory, designed by Dayton architect William Earl Russ, contained machinery from Cincinnati-based Fay and Egan Company and a small on-site coal power plant. The Wright Company required versatile and skilled workers for motor fabrication, assembly, and woodworking. Experienced lathe operators were needed to meet the degree of precision required for the wooden frame construction. Dayton's identity as a city of innovation allowed the Wright Company better access to skilled workers and machinery. By the late 19th century, Dayton contained 9 railroad lines and produced a variety of commercial products, which made it one of the most important industrial centers in Ohio. It attracted skilled workers seeking new opportunities and ranked highest for the number of patents awarded in 1900. This innovative community supported entrepreneurs, as evident in the Wright brothers' printing, bicycle, and airplane businesses. Aviation pioneers were inventors, innovators, and pilots who brought airplanes, accessories, and attention to the masses, beginning with Wilbur and Orville Wright's first powered flight in 1903. Wilbur focused his attention on the theory and mechanics of controlling the airplane during flight. He developed the theory of wing warping. Practical experimentation revealed that the standard tables of lift and drag were incorrect, so the Wright brothers built a wind tunnel in their shop to recalculate them. This enabled them to design new wings and build gliders that were capable of long, controlled flights. The data from the glider flights allowed them to perfect the airplane design, and the first powered flight occurred in the morning of December 17, 1903. By the end of the day, Wilbur Wright had flown 852 feet in 59 seconds. The brothers then set out to build a practical aircraft and succeeded by 1905. The combination of scientific experimentation, theoretical knowledge, and mechanical skills demonstrated by Orville and Wilbur made them uniquely qualified to open the era of aviation. After dropping out of high school in 1889, Orville Wright started a printing business by building a press with his brother Wilbur. The Wrights became intrigued with the bicycle and eventually opened a bicycle repair shop and showroom. Soon they began working on an improved bicycle design. In 1896, Orville came down with typhoid fever and read to pass the time during his recuperation. Both he and Wilbur quickly read all the information available to them at the time about gliders and flight. Of the 3 components required for human flight, lift, locomotion, and control, Orville's interests focused on the development of the engine that would power the aircraft. Working with Charlie Taylor, he built an engine in their shop. On December 17, 1903, Orville Wright was the first man to fly with a flight of 120 feet in 12 seconds. August 19, Orville's birthday, was designated as National Aviation Day by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1939 to commemorate the Wright brothers' pioneering contributions to flight and to encourage interest in aeronautics. Charlie Taylor built the engines that were used on the early Wright airplanes. He began working with the Wrights by serving as the bicycle shop repairman while the brothers were off on their flight experiments. When the experiments had progressed sufficiently so that the specifications for the airplane engine could be determined, it was decided that a motor with 8 horsepower and weighing 180 pounds was needed. After attempts to find such an engine failed, Wilbur, Orville, and Charlie decided to build their own. Much of the machine work was done by Charlie, who between Christmas of 1902 and June of 1903 built a 13 horsepower engine weighing a mere 130 pounds at the time when internal combustion engine technology was still in its infancy. Obviously, the engine worked as planned, the experiment was a success, and Charlie Taylor earned a spot in the honor roll of aviation pioneers as the first aviation mechanic. Charlie Taylor's birthday, May 24th, is celebrated as Aviation Maintenance Technician Day. What? In 1916, Colonel Edward A. Deeds initiated the establishment of a military aviation training site adjacent to Huffman Prairie, the site of the Wrights' early test flights. The War Department set up a military flying school and depot at the new 2,000-plus acre Wilbur Wright Fields. By 1917, the U.S. had entered World War I, and troops arrived at the recently opened facility in June for training. In consultation with Orville Wright, Deeds and Charles Kettering purchased 254 acres just north of downtown Dayton. By January of 1918, the newly completed McCook Field was ready for operation by the Army Air Services Engineering Division. As an engineering and research facility, McCook Field has been described as the single most influential agency in the early years of American air power. McCook's engineers and technicians researched, developed, manufactured, tested, and evaluated military aircraft and all of their associated components and equipment. At its peak, McCook Field contained 1,096 civilian employees and 378 military personnel. Deeds founded the Dayton Wright Airplane Company with Orville Wright, Harry E. Talbot, and Charles Kettering. Deeds was appointed Chief of Aircraft Production in Washington, D.C., and the Delco plant in Moraine, Ohio, was expanded to manufacture the de Havilland DH-4 bomber, the only American-built airplane to see action in World War I. More than 3,000 planes were built. In 1917, Deeds joined the United States Army with the rank of colonel, taking the responsibility for military aircraft procurement at McCook Field. Deeds lived in a magnificent home just south of Dayton, which later became Kettering, Ohio. Deeds' home was called Moraine Farm and was the first home in the United States to have a private airstrip. I have been there, and it's still there and quite remarkable. Charles Kettering was born in Loudonville, Ohio, and went to Dayton in 1904 to join the National Cash Register Company, where his first task was to electrify the cash register. He is most notably known for the development of the auto ignition system and self-starter that revolutionized the auto industry. Kettering's interest in aviation began in 1912 after taking a flight in a Wright brothers biplane. In 1916, he established the Dayton Research Laboratories Company and studied the phenomenon of knock in gasoline engines. He designed the ignition system for the Liberty aircraft engine and made the first synthetic aviation fuel. In 1917, Charles invented the unmanned Kettering aerial torpedo, nicknamed the Bug. Launched from a four-wheel dolly that ran down a portable track, the Bug system of internal preset pneumatic and electrical controls stabilized and guided it towards a target. After a predetermined length of time, a control closed an electrical circuit which shut off its engine. Then the wings were released, causing the Bug to plunge to Earth, where its 180 pounds of explosive detonated on impact. These were the first drones. The Dayton Wright Airplane Company built fewer than 50 Bugs before the armistice of World War I, and the Bug never saw combat. After the war, the U.S. Army Air Service conducted additional tests, but the scarcity of funds in the 1920s halted further development. In 1923, he researched engine knock and developed tetraethyl lead, a highly effective suppressant, and later he pioneered in developing high compression engines and improved fuels that increased aircraft engine horsepower and flight safety. Speaking of safety, the first working modern parachute was developed by trapeze artist turned aviator Floyd Smith. He became interested in parachutes after having survived a near-fatal airplane accident while working as a test pilot. After having gained aviation experience by building his own plane and working as a mechanic and test pilot for the Glenn L. Martin Company, Smith was hired by the U.S. Army Air Service to test and inspect planes at McCook Field in Dayton. Around that same time, in July 1918, he filed a patent for his parachute. Worn on the body and featuring a release mechanism attached to the pack itself, Smith's emergency bailout parachute model enabled jumpers to deploy the canopy manually with a ripcord instead of using a static line parachute attached to the plane, which could become entangled when jumping. This new chute design would both set the standard for decades to come and jumpstart the entire parachute industry. During World War I, an increasing number of military pilots' fatalities led the Army to seek a practical parachute for emergency escape from aircraft, and Smith was part of the team at McCook Field tasked with this project. His parachute was among many tested in 1919 and was one that best met the Army's requirements. Soon, the Type A design, which was closely based on Smith's original version, became the standard parachute for the Army. Smith's design was noted for its adaptability in escaping from planes in spins, dives, or inverted positions. By World War II, parachutes were saving pilots and flight crews of disabled planes. Smith left the government service in 1919. He licensed his patents to several parachute manufacturers and found companies of his own, including the Floyd Smith Aerial Equipment Company and Pioneer Parachute Company. Captain Rudolph Schroeder served as a U.S. Army test pilot and chief of all Army test flying at McCook Field. He set numerous world records, including a flight of 33,114 feet in an open cockpit Packard Lapierre Lusac 11 with only heavy clothing and a regulation oxygen mask for protection from the 67 degrees below zero temperature. At the height of his flight, he began to feel dizzy from oxygen deficiency and raised his goggles momentarily to locate the emergency oxygen supply. The extreme cold froze the moisture in his eyes, blinding him. His attempt to descend resulted in an extreme vertical drop that caused Schroeder to pass out, but he regained consciousness in time to pull out of the 6-mile dive at 2,000 feet. Although he was almost totally blind, Schroeder was able to locate McCook Field and land safely. Perhaps influenced by the deaths of fellow exhibition flyers, Schroeder focused on safety features for aviators, favoring the new parachute design by Floyd Smith. Schroeder was the first military aviator to wear Smith's parachute pack in 1919 and was the first instructor to open a night flying school for military instruction. In 1945, the 6'4" tall Shorty Schroeder was honored with the Distinguished Flying Cross. Whoops, this is touchy. Philip Parmalee was an American aviation pioneer, trained by the Wright brothers and credited with several early world aviation records and firsts in flight. He turned a keen interest in small engines into employment with the Wright Company in its early years and was one of several young pilots hired by the Wrights to demonstrate and publicize the capabilities of their airplanes. Because of his youth, blonde good looks, and daring reputation, Parmalee had the nickname Skyman attributed to him. Among the feats credited to Parmalee are the first commercial flight of an airplane establishing a world cross-country speed record, holding the world flying endurance record, piloting the first aircraft to drop a bomb, conducting the first military reconnaissance flight, and piloting the first aircraft involved in the world's first parachute jump. On November 7, 1910, Parmelee became the first pilot to transport commercial cargo. His flight took him 65 miles from Dayton, carrying a package of 100 pounds of silk worth about $1,000 for the opening of a store. Parmelee's route took him from Dayton to Columbus, Ohio, by way of South Charleston and London, following the route of the Old National Road. Newspaper clippings quoted the Wright brothers as stating, "He covered this distance in 66 minutes, but the flight was officially recorded at 57 minutes, a world speed record at the time." Parmelee was killed in the crash of an airplane he was piloting at an exhibition in Yakima, Washington, when turbulence flipped the airplane upside down. But this was not a strange thing to happen. He had 7 recorded plane crashes in his career, including 1 into his father's sawmill and 2 into the river behind it. Clayton Bruckner was the founder and president of the Weaver Aircraft Company of Ohio, known as Waco Aircraft Company in Troy, Ohio, which provided hundreds of jobs in the 1920s through the 1940s. During its operation, more than 5,000 Wacos were manufactured. They were reliable, rugged planes that included open cockpit biplanes, cabin biplanes, and cabin sesquiplanes, known by Waco as custom cabins, as well as numerous experimental types that were popular with traveling businessmen, postal services, and explorers. Over 350 of them are still flying today. During World War II, the company manufactured gliders to support U.S. military operations. Clayton Bruckner was also active as an inventor and philanthropist. He designed, among other things, a hydraulic-operated log splitter, a mechanical sod cutter, and a submersible office he used to study marine life in his family's pond. He was the founder of the Bruckner Nature Center in Troy, which offers over 90,000 visitors a year the opportunity to study the natural surroundings. The center's wildlife rehab unit cares for injured wildlife and has been nationally recognized for its accomplishments. There's a wonderful museum in Troy, Ohio for any aviation enthusiasts out there to go visit the Waco Airplane Museum. It's right off of I-75. George Goddard was a United States Air Force Brigadier General and pioneer in aerial photography. On December 14, 1917, Goddard enlisted in the aviation section of the U.S. Army Signal Corps and entered the aerial photography course at the School of Military Aeronautics at Cornell University. Upon completion of the 3-month course, he became an instructor in aerial photographic interpretation. In 1919, he was assigned to McCook Field as officer in charge of aerial photographic research. In that capacity, he started developments in infrared and long-range photography, special aerial cameras, photographic aircraft, and portable field laboratory equipment, and formed the nucleus of the present photographic laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. For 18 years, Goddard was chief of the Air Force's Photographic Research Laboratory in Dayton. He developed and held the patents on the Air Force's system for taking night pictures. Developed in 1926, the system, with improvements, is still in use today. His developments eventually led to the creation of U-2 and SR-71 spy planes used in the Cold War and ultimately spy satellites. Besides pioneering stereoscopic, high-altitude, nighttime, and color photography, he also developed the continuous film strip camera and introduced the moving film magazine during World War II. He continued contributing to aerial recon into the 1960s, and his long and distinguished career earned him the moniker the Godfather of Aerial Reconnaissance. In 1917, Robert Hartzell owned a small airplane and dreamed of being a barnstormer. His father encouraged him to focus his efforts on airplane repair and rebuilding, and he soon discovered a high failure rate with wood propellers. Robert's friend, Orville Wright, suggested that he use walnut wood to manufacture airplane propellers. This suggestion marks the beginning of the Hartzell Walnut Propeller Company, and during World War I, Hartzell provided Liberty aircraft propellers for warplanes. In 1923, Hartzell builds its first airplane primarily out of plywood, the FC-1. It wins first place in its class at the International Air Races in St. Louis, Missouri. Hartzell then builds a second all-wood plane, the FC-2, which wins even more prizes, money, and notoriety for the company. In 1926, Hartzell installs wood propellers on the Aranca C-2 aircraft and then manufactures propellers for the USS Shenandoah, the first rigid airship. In the late 1930s, Hartzell begins the manufacture of metal blades for the Hamilton Standard and Curtiss companies. By 1942, the Hartzell company transitioned into making metal aluminum propellers and develops a process for gluing wood to metal for production of gliders. And in 1944, Hartzite, a composite material, is used in manufacturing airplane propellers. By the late 1940s, Hartzell's innovation and its ability to create propellers in an expedient manner makes them the leading supplier of propellers to the general aviation market. Today, the Piqua, Ohio company is leader in the manufacturing of composite propellers for airplanes and unmanned aerial vehicles. Warren G. Grimes was born in rural Montgomery County, Ohio in 1898, just a few miles from where the Wright brothers had lived and worked. During 1913, at the age of 15, oh, I'm sorry. Here is Warren G. Grimes. He ran away at the age of 15 in 1913, ran away from an orphanage in Tiffin to live with his brother Frank in Detroit. He worked at the Ford Company until he became a partner in a small electrical business that impressed Henry Ford. Ford approached Grimes in the mid-1920s and requested him to design a light for the Ford tri-motor aircraft. Grimes designed and produced the lamps within 48 hours, making the beginning of his aviation entrepreneurial legacy. In the 1930s, Grimes moved to Urbana, Ohio, and started Grimes Manufacturing Company and purchased the Johnson Farm, located on the northern side of Urbana, where he built his residence and an airstrip, which became Grimes Field Airport. Grimes invented the familiar red, green, and white navigation lights found on the wingtips and tails of aircraft and other electrical fixtures for aircraft, including landing, instrument, and interior lights. By World War II, Grimes Manufacturing Company produced aircraft lighting for the U.S. military. It is noted that every American-made airplane flown during World War II was equipped with Grimes lights. Grimes also served as mayor of Urbana and chairman of the State of Ohio Aviation Board. Grimes Manufacturing is now owned by Honeywell and continues to design and manufacture lighting systems for the aerospace and transportation industries. It's the only color photograph you're going to see in this program. I had to show the color, right? Dale White Sr. was a prominent African-American pilot best known for his 1939 Goodwill flight with Chauncey Spencer from Chicago to Washington, D.C. The Chicago Air Pilots Association and Chicago Defender, the local African-American newspaper, organized the flight. Dale was chosen to be the pilot of the flight, and Chauncey was selected as the navigator. With a CAPA-secured rental of a Lincoln PTK biplane, White and Spencer left Chicago on May 8, 1939 for their 3,000-mile round trip. The goal was to lobby for a change in legislation so African Americans could join the U.S. Army Corps and to make the case for their participation in flight training, both civilian and military. His flight illustrated the challenges that African Americans faced in reaching equality and the inconsistency in how pioneers like White were treated. Born in 1899 in Minden, Louisiana, White moved to Chicago, Illinois in 1930. In 1932, he began his studies at the Curtiss-Wright Aeronautical University, the first accredited flight school in the Midwest to admit black students and to hire black instructors. On August 18th of 1933, White began his flight training, and he received his pilot's license in June of 1936. In 1940, White became an aircraft mechanic at Wright-Patterson Field in Dayton. Even then, his race made the application process difficult, as he received conflicting information about how to apply for and accept positions. When the United States entered World War II, White did not join the Tuskegee Airmen, as he was too old to apply. He did continue to fly until June 1941, when he quit flying at the request of his wife. He retired from Wright-Patterson in 1971 and died in 1977. There we go. General Armstrong was a flight surgeon, teacher, writer, and researcher who founded the Psychological Research Laboratory at Wright Field in 1935. He conducted pioneering work leading to the development of equipment which permitted pilots to fly safely at supersonic speeds and high altitudes. His work in determining the psychological effects of abrupt deceleration, curvilinear flight, and the problems associated with high-altitude operations led to G-suits, oxygen systems, and pressure-breathing equipment while helping define the human requirements for spaceflight. Dr. Armstrong conducted pioneer aviation medical research and authored the classic textbook on aviation medicine, as well as over 100 papers on aerospace medicine. The Armstrong Laboratory at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is named for him. Dr. Hans Joachim Pabst von Ohain was an engineer and physicist who invented the gas turbine jet engine in the 1930s while still in his native Germany. This invention opened a new era in transportation and warfare. In 1947, Ohain was brought to the United States by Operation Paperclip, a secret United States intelligence program in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from former Nazi Germany to the United States for government employment after the end of World War II. He became a research scientist at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where he continued to work on issues surrounding jet propulsion. In 1956, he was appointed chief scientist of the Aerospace Research Laboratories. In 1973, he became chief scientist of the Aero Propulsion Laboratory, assuming responsibility for maintaining the technical quality of the U.S. Air Force research in air-breathing propulsion, power, and petrochemicals. His accomplishments in those areas won him national and international recognition. During his 32 years of government service, Ohain published more than 30 technical papers, registered more than 19 U.S. patents, and won numerous awards. Ohain retired from Wright-Patterson in 1979 and took up an associate professor position teaching propulsion and thermodynamics at the University of Dayton. He retired from UD in 1992, moved to Melbourne, Florida, and then when he died was buried back in Dayton. One of the lessons we can learn from the story of the Tuskegee Airmen is the value of having a goal. Theirs was to be the first Black American military pilots, and meeting it through sheer determination and hard work. Airman Lewis Jackson's life is a prime example of how that works. Dr. Lewis A. Jackson of Xenia, Ohio, was born in Angola, Indiana. His family was the only Black family in town. He started working at the age of 8 to contribute to the family's income, and while in grade school, he constructed model airplanes and read about crosswind landings in encyclopedias. At the age of 15, he had his first ride in an Ox 5 Swallow. In 1929, he designed and flew his own hang gliders. 2 years later, he was so determined to fly that he bought a fixer-upper Alco Sport monoplane and put a motorcycle engine in it. Although that airplane was destroyed during a windstorm before he could fly it, he didn't give up. The following year, he began formal flight instruction and soloed 2 years later at the age of 20. From 1932 to 1937, Jackson barnstormed through Indiana and Ohio, earning money to pay his way through college. In 1937, he acquired the transport pilot's license in northern Indiana. In 1939, he was rated as a commercial pilot with instructor rating. That year, he also earned his Bachelor of Science degree in education and got a job teaching in public schools. In 1940, he joined Cornelius Coffey in the Coffey and Jackson Flying School in Chicago, where several civil pilot training students were taught. Jackson completed advanced acrobatic training at the Chicago School of Aeronautics, and in October of the same year, he went to Tuskegee, where he earned an airframe and power plant mechanics license and instrument rating, and at the same time, he was teaching ground school there. In that same time frame, he also took coursework in aerial navigation in Georgia and the Civil Aeronautics Administration cross-country instructor course in Boston. He was one determined man. Back in Tuskegee, Jackson became the director of training for the 99th Pursuit Squadron, the first black military aviation squadron. He instilled his own passion for educational excellence and flight to his students. As a result, on 3 separate occasions, his students ranked first in comparison with the other 22 schools in the Southeast Army Air Corps Training Command. After the war, Jackson moved to Ohio, where he became an FAA flight examiner and tested over 400 pilots for flight certification from 1947 to 1960. He developed an aircraft computer called the Nav Kit, which was used by many pilots in obtaining their licenses. An airplane in every garage. This was the goal of Dr. Jackson. Until a few months before his death, he was still working on such a design, a roadable airplane, which would accommodate the common man, an airplane which could be stored at home and towed or driven to the airport. In 1956, Dr. Jackson created and flew the Versatile One, the first of 10 experimental airplanes developed to serve as both an airplane and a car. The idea was to drive it to the airport, take off, return, and then drive it home. Oh, we could only wish. In the early 1960s, Dr. Jackson created and flew a different experimental plane which folded its wings for land travel. Only 16 feet long, the plane would fit in a garage once its 12-foot wingspan was folded. On the highway, it operated like a 3-wheel motorcycle, cruising at 35 to 50 miles per hour. The propeller was behind the passenger compartment in a slot surrounded by body, wings, and tail. This design created enough attention in England to cause the editor of Jane's All the World's Aircraft to portray and describe it to their worldwide membership of subscribers. Dr. Jackson was not able to market any of his experimental airplanes due to either design flaws or the inability to produce the product economically with the level of government regulations to be met. In 1948, Jackson obtained a master's degree from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, and in 1950, a PhD in higher education from the Ohio State University. Dr. Jackson's life was dedicated to education. After World War II, he began teaching at the college level and served in many college and university administrative positions at both Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, and Sinclair Community College in Dayton. Jackson served a number of years as a member of the Greene County Regional Airport Authority. In Dr. Jackson's honor, the airport in Xenia, Ohio is now named the Greene County Lewis A. Jackson Regional Airport. Zoe Dell Nutter was a multifaceted American pioneer who rose to fame as a dancer and model before becoming a trailblazing commercial pilot, business executive, and philanthropist. Often called the First Lady of Aviation, she dedicated over 70 years to promoting air travel and preserving its history. In 1939, she served as the official hostess and theme girl for the Golden Gate International Exposition on Treasure Island in California. Dressed in a pirate costume, she logged over 100,000 air miles to promote the fair and the safety of commercial aviation, earning the title of the most photographed girl in the world. Before her aviation career, she was a principal dancer for the San Francisco Ballet and briefly appeared in films for Paramount Pictures. After a leg injury ended her professional dancing career, she learned to fly, eventually logging over 2,000 flight hours and earning multi-engine and instrument ratings. As president of the Small Aircraft Division at Elano Corps, she helped develop a redesigned stainless steel exhaust manifold that became an industry standard for piston aircraft. She joined the Ohio Civil Air Patrol, flying search and rescue missions, and became active in the National Aviation Hall of Fame, with 12 years service as a board member and serving as its first woman president in 1988. Along with her husband, Irvin J. Nutter, she donated millions to various causes, including a $1.5 million gift to Wright State University in Dayton to build the Irvin J. Nutter Center. Zoe Del Nutter passed away in April of 2020 at the age of 104 at her home in Beaver Creek Township, Greene County, Ohio. Her remains were spread over Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I found 2 quotes from her that I thought I would share with you. The first one, she said, "The most dangerous part of flying is the trip to the airport." The second is, "In all the years I flew, I never lost my luggage, and I've never lost my lunch." Enlisting in the United States Navy Reserves during World War II, John Glenn, a native of Cambridge, Ohio, became an aviation cadet, completed flight training, and was designated a naval aviator in 1943, whereupon he accepted a commission in the United States Marine Corps Reserves. He served in the Pacific Theater, where he flew 59 combat missions and earned 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses and 10 Air Medals. After the war, he entered the regular Marine Corps and served 2 years in the Far East. He returned home in 1949 and became a flight instructor, attended the Marine Corps School, and took the Jet Aircraft Refresher course. He was then sent to Korea, where he flew 90 combat missions and earned 2 Distinguished Flying Crosses and 8 Air Medals. After attending the Navy Test Pilot School, he served as project officer on Navy flight interceptors. In 1957, he made the first non-stop supersonic transcontinental flight in 3 hours and 23 minutes. With the advent of the U.S. space program, he was selected by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA, as one of the first 7 astronauts. After 10 flight postponements, he was launched in his Friendship 7 Mercury Atlas space capsule on February 20th, 1962, and successfully inserted into Earth's orbit at 17,545 miles per hour. After completing 3 orbits in 4 hours, 41 minutes, he safely landed his spacecraft in the Atlantic Ocean. He was then presented the NASA Distinguished Service Medal, promoted to colonel by the president, and honored by the nation and the world. Born near Wapakoneta, Ohio, Neil Armstrong showed an early interest in aviation and received his student pilot licensure on his 16th birthday. After entering Purdue University, he was called to active duty, earned his naval aviator wings, and flew 78 carrier-based combat missions in Korea. Upon receiving an aeronautical engineering degree from Purdue, he tested supersonic aircraft, including the X-1 and X-15 for the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics at its Edwards Air Force Base facility. Selected by NASA in 1962 as the nation's first civilian astronaut, Armstrong served as backup command pilot of the Gemini 5 mission. Then, as command pilot of the Gemini 8, he and astronaut David Scott made the first spacecraft docking in history by linking up with an orbiting target vehicle in 1966. He also served as backup command pilot of the Gemini 11 and Apollo 8 missions. As commander of the Apollo 11 lunar landing mission, he and astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Michael Collins were launched into space to intercept the moon. 4 days later, lunar orbiting was achieved, and the lunar module Eagle separated from the command module Columbia and made a safe landing on July 21, 1969. As Armstrong emerged from the spacecraft and first stepped upon the moon, he said, "That is one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." After he and Aldrin collected lunar rock specimens, unveiled a plaque, erected an American flag, and set up scientific instruments, they re-entered the Eagle and rocketed off the moon to join Collins orbiting in the Columbia. Accelerating out of lunar orbit, they returned safely to Earth, completing their million-mile space journey in just 8 days. Tom Crouch is a renowned aviation author, museum curator, and aeronautics historian. His book of Dayton's Orville and Wilbur Wright, called The Bishop's Boys, is often cited as the definitive work on these aviation pioneers. Dr. Crouch has written 16 major books on various aspects of aviation history, as well as approximately 100 articles in magazines and journals worldwide. In addition to his work as an author and historian, he serves as senior curator of the Division of Aeronautics at the National Air and Space Museum at the Smithsonian, where he has curated many important exhibitions, including A More Perfect Union, Japanese Americans in the U.S. Constitution, still in place at the National Museum of American History. His preeminence in his field has been recognized with numerous awards, including a presidential appointment as chairman of the First Flight Centennial Federal Advisory Board in 2003. This prize-winning author, respected historian, and accomplished curator has helped focus the attention of the world on the whole history of aviation, but especially its roots in his native Dayton, Ohio. From Wapakoneta to Springboro, Ohio, this area located in central western Ohio is designated by Congress as a heritage area. The vision for the heritage area is to make the Dayton region the recognized global center of aviation heritage and premier destination for aviation heritage tourism and sustaining the legacy of the Wright brothers. The National Aviation Heritage Area encompasses an 8-county area, including Montgomery, Greene, Miami, Clark, Warren, Champaign, Shelby, and Auglaize counties in Ohio. These are the 10 official These are the 10 sites designated within the heritage area, but there are many more ancillary sites associated with the Wright brothers and Dayton's aviation history. I hope you'll plan a trip to this part of Ohio where we like to say, it's great in Dayton. So I thank you for attending this program. I hope you learned about Dayton's or Ohio's aviation history. A lot of it centered in and around Dayton, but also in other places of Ohio. Are there any questions, comments, thoughts, suggestions? Yeah.
Who you and I talked about, who you do not focus here, is Catherine Wright. Can you talk about Catherine Wright?
Sure. Catherine was born in Dayton. She attended Central High School and then went to Oberlin College in Oberlin, Ohio. Then came back to Dayton and she taught at Steele High School. She was teaching, I believe, Latin and English. In 1908, when Orville was in a horrific plane crash in Virginia, he was demonstrating an airplane of which the very first passenger was killed, Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge. Orville had sustained a permanent back injury and was recuperating and called for Catherine. She went to Virginia, never to return to her teaching job, and then from then on, she continued to take care of not only Orville and Wilbur, but their father as well. It is said that Catherine did the math. I'm not so sure. I mean, Wilbur was quite capable, and because they built the wind tunnel in Dayton, they were able to do the calculations. Wilbur would have a picture of him sitting at a sewing machine, and he sewed, but so did Catherine as well, muslin for the airplanes. But also, the Wright brothers were kind of unsociable. Not that they weren't sociable, but they didn't like the limelight, let's just say that. And when they went to France, Catherine became the face of the Wright brothers. She was able to talk to the crowds, woo the crowds, while Orville and Wilbur were very much focused on the airplanes, getting it up in the air, doing the technical maintenance that needed to be done, and Catherine was able to be interviewed for the newspapers and whatnot in that time period. So Catherine had a very integral part in the Wright brothers' journey. Interesting story, because of this, Orville had really a short leash on her, even though they were brother and sister. When she was 50 years old, she started a correspondence with her college sweetheart, Henry Haskell, who happened to be the editor of the Kansas City Star newspaper. His first wife had died. He started this correspondence with Catherine. They fell in love all over again. He asked for Catherine's hand in marriage. Catherine said, "You're going to need to ask Orville." Henry goes to Orville. "I'd like to marry your sister." Orville tells Catherine, "Go do whatever you want." Well, what did she do? Of course, she took off and got married right at the age of 50. She finally began to have a life for herself. Just 2 years later, she contracted pneumonia. In that 2-year time period, Orville and Catherine never spoke. Their brother, Rushlin, who was also living out in the Kansas City area, sent a telegram to Orville and said, "Catherine is dying. You need to come make amends." Orville went to Kansas City. Word has it that he walked into the room, said, "I forgive you," turned around and left. So if you think you have dysfunction in your family, one of the Ohio and the world's greatest family also had dysfunction. So, and she died at the age of 52 and was brought back to Ohio and in Dayton, and was buried with the family in the Platte and Woodland Cemetery. Thank you. Anything else?
Could you talk a little bit about Hawthorne Hill? When is it open? Do you still need reservations? And Catherine and Orville were the ones that designed it?
Yes, yes, no. So Hawthorne Hill is the home that began construction in 1911, 12-ish, and with Orville and Wilbur. They designed the home. They were going, to construct the home. Unfortunately, Wilbur contracts typhoid fever and dies in 1912 before the home is completed. The home is finally completed late 1913, 1914, after Dayton suffered the Great Flood of 1913. Orville moves in, Catherine moves in, and so does their father, the Bishop Milton Wright. And they all live there together at Hawthorne Hill. Hawthorne Hill, after Orville's death, NCR purchases the home and does it an injustice. They make it a home for visitors coming to NCR corporate headquarters in Dayton. So they remodel it, they do all kinds, ripping out certain things, but they did leave Orville's library intact. You can go in and see where he sat and where he had a special prop for his chair to lift his leg because of the injury that he had sustained. He read one word a day in the encyclopedia, or I'm sorry, out of the dictionary. So the dictionary that he read from is laying right there on the table, and most of the original books are on the bookshelves. He also had, because of the back injury, he had in his shower, in his personal suite, the shower had the shower heads so that it would land on his back, what we would consider normal today, but in 12, 13, that was very unusual. So they did originally keep that. One unique thing, I've been to Hawthorne Hill. You can go. It is operated through Dayton History, the Carillon Park. Yes, you do need to make a reservation. They bus you over there. They give you a fantastic tour, and then they take you back to the Carillon Park. So yes, you can do that. I think one Saturday a month, so you really have to plan your trip out to go see that. I've been there for several events. One evening I was there with Amanda Wright Lane and Stephen Wright, the great-great-grandnephew and niece of the Wright brothers. And Stephen took us up on the Widow's Walk, which was really cool and scary all at the same time. I'm afraid of heights. So we're standing up there, and he's talking about the lights of Dayton. And if you look southward, you could see Moraine Farm, where Colonel Deeds had his airstrip. And then if you turned around and looked to the east, you can see the glow of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, I worked at Woodland Cemetery for 9 years. That is the location of where the Wright brothers are buried, amongst others. The flight pattern through Dayton is that every plane going to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base flies over the graves of the Wright brothers, which is really, really fantastic. And one other quick story about many, many years ago, 17 or something like that, the International Space Station was flying right over Dayton. I happened to be giving an evening tour called History, Mystery, Murder, and Mayhem, which is a whole nother story. But we had just walked away from the Wright brothers and came into a clearing, and a gentleman had on his phone exactly when the space station was going to fly over. We all stopped, and we watched it from the western sky fly right over the Wright brothers' grave all the way to the east until we couldn't see it anymore. I still get chills. When I talk. It was being at the right time, at the right place, at the Wright brothers' gravesite to see something that was really, really phenomenal. So, yeah, it is great in Dayton. You should come visit, all of you. Come visit. Anything else? Well, thank you all so much for coming. I hope you've learned a little bit about Dayton or Ohio's aviation history altogether, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.